It's all on.
Are we live?
Almost.
Okay. Man, that was horrible.
No, you look fucking hot. You're almost live.
I'm very sorry to talk to you because if not, I will be terrified that I won't talk.
I'm right here with you.
Shit. Ready? And alright, you guys are on the air.
All right. Hi, my name is Gregory Nelson, at Greg L. Nelson. I'm interested in international development, and I met a really interesting person, Candy, here at BIL, and I think she has some different ideas and a different background on education I hadn't heard about before, so I thought you would like to hear about it as well. I think a lot of us in our society don't get to interact often with children. You know, we go to work and our kids go to school. And so she's been spending a lot of her time, especially with very young children, and I think she has some things to say. So hi, Candy.
Hi.
Hi. So my first question is, what is, kind of a summary of Waldorf education? What is this kind of educational way of thinking and this kind of thought system?
Well, it is a philosophy that looks at the complete development of the child, not just their cognitive development, not just their physical development, not just their social development. And it also comes from a philosophy that does state that we are spiritual beings. So it also looks at the fact that there is spiritual development happening. Not religious development, but that there is something there that's beyond our physical. And so all of those are taken into consideration when planning curriculum and activities and meeting the child where they are.
And so at about what age would you start working with children? Like when would they enter the educational system? Or what's the
Children are always learning. So the moment that they are, in essence, conceived, they're learning. There was in fact a TED Talk very recently that went around about what we learn before we're born. So we know that learning is taking place all the time, and it's certainly not just happening in school. And you're learning more from your environment and the people around you than you are from what your teachers are telling you.
Mm-hmm.
And so where I am most involved in Waldorf is in the early childhood, and our main
Early
focus,
childhood starting around?
Early childhood can be even in a parent-toddler class of infants, all the way up through the time when children enter first grade, which in the Waldorf philosophy is generally closer to the age of 7.
What's the age in the prevailing education system?
I believe that the public school cutoff is 6 by May 31st of the year before you go into that grade.
So it's a little bit later, a little bit more time before
We're
starting.
a year and a half later than the public school's birthday cutoff.
And so what are some of the things that you really focus on in creating an environment conducive to learning with those young kids?
Really focusing on the fact that at that age, children learn almost exclusively through imitation, and creating an environment that is worthy of their imitation. Because whatever you do and whatever you create in their environment is what they're taking in and what they're going to imitate and bring out into the world.
So what are some of the common practices in the prevailing education system that you think are harmful to kids in that developmental period?
Well, I would say that...
Or some of the things that should be focused on but aren't focused on?
I think that we really need to focus more on being conscious of what we're exposing children to, and being conscious of the trade-off that we're making. When we, for instance, have a child who is watching 2 or 3 TV shows a day, that's, an hour and a half that child is sitting in front of a television. And what are they not doing instead of, so what are they missing? Because really it's more a question of what are we trading off than how harmful is this thing that we're doing. What are they losing by doing that instead of what are they gaining by doing this? And that's really something that I at least focus on a lot in my classroom, because the most important thing that children learn through is their play. And so every time I bring something that isn't their own self-initiated, self-governed play, I have to say to myself, is this activity worth taking away their play, which is their most important way of learning about the world?
So when children are young, are there certain ages before which they can't kind of do book learning or things like that, or it's not useful to do, for instance, certain activities?
So at almost any age, I mean, starting very, very young, and I don't know if anyone has come up with the exact age, but starting very young, children can learn to memorize things and relay them back to you. And that can be done really early. The age when children can really start comprehending things varies based on the topic. The younger the child, the more concrete it needs to be for them to really comprehend it. The older they get, the more abstract you can be with things. And so, in essence, children at a very young age can understand levers, but they can't understand them in the way that you and I speak about them in a physics class. They can understand them in the way a teeter-totter works, or the way a broom works. And they can't understand them on that intellectual level. They can memorize what we say about them, and they can memorize physics terms, but they can't understand. And I'll give you a really quick little story that is fantastic. One of my most favorite kindergarten teachers up in Santa Cruz always tells this story. He had a little boy who was very precocious and whose parents were in a science-related field. And so the little boy had asked one day about rain and where it came from and why it rained. And they explained the water cycle to him. And they explained condensation and all of that. And he memorized it. And he went to school, and the children were playing, and one of the little children asked, why does it rain? And so there was a group there who was like, okay, yeah, why does it rain? And he explains the water cycle to them. And they all look at him with this blank stare, and they say, well, yeah, but why does it rain? And he explains the water cycle again. And they look at him again, like, just with these blank stares, and they go, well, but why does it rain? And he launches in again on his monologue about the water cycle. And finally they kind of exasperated, stomp off and go ask the teacher, why does it rain? And the teacher says, because the plants and the flowers need a drink. And they run back to him and excitedly tell him, because the plants and the flowers need a drink. And he launches into the, but the water cycle and that's the difference of what you can have a child memorize and what children can comprehend. And sometimes children are looking for that simpler, more essence of the answer rather than the scientific answer.
And so, I remember one story that I heard in Seymour Papper's Mindstorms book is that he talks about when he was very young, like 2 or 3, he remembers like getting this physical, tangible understanding of a gear shaft in a car and how this kind of stuck with him, and he used to relate new pieces of knowledge and new ideas to that experience that he had. And it's not that he understood it in the same way that in physics, equations of it, but it still became an anchor and something that he had this excitement about it, that he had been able to at least take a step towards, an understanding of it. And even if it wasn't part of his world then to know, oh, I understand this gear shaft, but do not yet comprehend this abstract symbolic notion of mathematics and all of that. Like, that's not in his mind when he was young. So I'm wondering how, and if you see, in your children, those curiosities get kind of fulfilled and become stepping stones to later on learning.
I really do. And I get to see it every once in a while because a lot of the children who are in my program are with me for a long time, and I am, in essence, part of their family too. So I see them when they come back and they're older. And I see, as they're learning new things, when they come back and they come into the room and they remember these concrete experiences that they had and how it relates to what they're learning now. And they aren't always articulate enough to say this, but what I really kind of get from them is that when they were in the early childhood and their earlier grades, they were learning that things work. They were learning that a broom works like this. They were learning that this particular character in this piece of literature was this, and these things happened. And as they get into higher grades and they get more of that abstract thinking and the abstract concepts, then they're learning how and why. But it's so much easier for them because they've already got this concrete experience to build on. They already know what a broom works like. They don't have to recreate that experience because it lives inside of them.
So one thing I didn't bring out is, so how many teachers does a person in the Waldorf system have between 1st and 8th grade?
Ideally one class teacher. There are generally specialty teachers, so there'll be usually two language teachers, ideally a music teacher who will do singing and recorder in the very early grades, and then introduce string instruments around 3rd or 4th grade. And there will also oftentimes be a eurythmy teacher, which is a movement form that is written in Waldorf schools. So there'll be a lot of other teachers that the child will be interacting with, but they'll have one main class teacher, which will be a person who delivers the general curriculum, the math, science, reading, writing. A lot of the artistic integration comes through the class teacher.
And what are some of the benefits of there being, one primary teacher over such a long period of time?
Well, there are a number of them. One of the biggest ones is that the teacher can work with each child where they're at and doesn't have to worry about having them all at the same spot at the end of the year. Because if little Johnny is still just not quite getting fractions, and it's the end of 4th grade, but he's moving along in the correct progression of learning about fractions.
Yeah, he won't be lost next year. It's not like the teacher will be like, well, if you don't know fractions, I have to just keep moving on.
Yeah. So the teacher can know that next year she'll just work a little harder, or he'll just work a little harder with little Johnny, and they'll go over them a few more times, and she can tailor curriculum like that. And know that just because little Johnny doesn't have it this year, you can still work on it next year. Because you'll still know right where little Johnny is, and you'll know how to work pick up right where you left off. Also, on a more social level, when children get into that middle school age where their bodies are changing and they are feeling really out of place, socially, physically, on all levels, and they're just feeling really out of sorts, the class, which has ideally been together since 1st grade, along with the teacher, can remember back to 1st grade when everybody could move perfectly and sing beautifully and do everything wonderfully. And they can have that collective and shared memory to look back on. And the teachers I've spoken to who have taken classes through 8th grade say in 8th grade they spend an enormous amount of time retelling the fairy tales from 1st grade singing the songs, playing the games, because it really comforts these children as they're going through this amazing change that is really unsettling for them, to know that there's somebody who can remember back to when they were amazing and wonderful and has been with them all this time and still loves and adores them.
So, so what's the kind of
Almost ready. But 30 seconds.
30 seconds
Yes.
left?
Yes.
Okay. Well, where can people go to find more information about Waldorf?
There is an association called the Association of Waldorf Schools of North America, and they have a website if you Google them. And I do not know the actual www, but Association of Waldorf Schools of North America.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Candy.
Thank
you
you,
so much.
Greg.
I really enjoyed it. And I hope that you have time to share more of this kind of stuff.
That would be great.
Yay!
Yay!